Hello, welcome to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast, where it is all about helping amazing physicians just like you create a wealthy life free from burnout and with the financial security to practice medicine on your own terms. I'm your host, Dr. Elisa Chiang. Hello, and welcome back to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast. We have an incredible guest here today, Dr. Liz Aguire, who's a physician, real estate investor, and TEDx speaker. Dr. Liz came to me from money coaching for scarcity around money. But when you hear her childhood growing up in poverty, you're going to be amazed at what she's accomplished and the person she's become. So Liz, why don't you introduce yourself further?
Great. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I think that's a good introduction. It's so interesting. I have a really hard time just kind of summarizing myself. But yes, I grew up in poverty, and ultimately I had that mindset, like, I don't care what it takes. I'm going to succeed and I'm going to never go through that again. So that involved a lot of hard work, working 2 jobs through undergrad and going to school full time, ultimately making the decision to go to medical school, becoming a physician. Worked as a hospitalist for over 10 years and then switched to a non-clinical role. And during that time, I think I made a lot of mindset shifts. At that time, I was like, am I fully content in this role? I felt like leaving clinical medicine was a challenge, but there were a lot of reasons that went on behind that. Branched out, made the decision to pursue professional speaking, which I did for about 2 years. I just came on the 1-year anniversary of my TED Talk. And that TED Talk resulted in a lot of additional outreach and speaking engagements. And so then I went through that and made the decision to shift again and said, you know what, this is an itch that I've scratched, and I've done the professional speaking. And I was so just incredibly thankful for the opportunities that I had, and just made the decision to shift again and focus on my health and my family and see which direction I want to shift to next. Yeah.
It's so awesome, all the changes you made in your life. But let's go and dive into your childhood. So tell us a little bit more about what your childhood was like.
For the most part, it's interesting because my husband asked me this all the time. He used to ask me about my childhood all the time. The interesting thing is, the truth is, I have really blocked out a lot of my childhood. And I'm really surprised when memories surface because they're always triggered by events. Like, I know we grew up in poverty. I remember being hungry all the time. I remember periods where we were living in a tent. I remember being made fun of for not having clothes, and I remember friends feeding me at athletic events because I never had food. But for the most part, I think the really challenging times I blocked out. And part of that I just kind of relayed right now, I remember when there's a trigger. So I was driving in downtown Austin, and there in the last several years has been an explosion of homelessness here. And I remember looking over and seeing a blue tent, and my heart started racing and I started getting really anxious, and I had no idea why. I was like, why is that making me so anxious? And then it hit me because that tent looked like the tent that we lived in for a while when I was young. And I had no memory of that. None, zero. I had not thought of that in decades. And in that moment, it came back. And so usually my thoughts about my childhood, either they come from pictures and something brings that into my memory, or there's a trigger like that. But it was very, very challenging. I started working when I was 9 years old. So when my girls were 9, I started having some anxiety around that time. And I didn't understand why. And then I realized, oh my goodness, this is when things got really bad and I started working. So I think it was a challenging childhood, but it really taught me a lot about hard work, work ethic, persevering, not giving up, problem solving. It's funny, if you ask my girls, what is your mom really good at? They'll say problem solving. And it's always the first thing out of their mouth. And those are just skills I've learned out of pure necessity. But in a nutshell, that's kind of how my childhood was. It was just extremely rough.
So do you think your poverty preventing you from pursuing anything? Like you went to college. I mean, how hard was that for you?
It was incredibly challenging. I didn't know how to go to college. So, for example, I got several scholarships to universities, and I didn't know you actually had to apply to go to the university. So I lost those scholarships because I didn't get accepted because I never applied. And so I went to junior college first. I did have some just general scholarships that I was able to use on financial aid. There were a lot of challenges, like I didn't have a car. So how would I get to college when even the junior college was 30 minutes away? So again, it all came to problem solving and just figuring it out. So it was clear to me, I need to get a job and I need to get a car so that I can get to college. And so I was already used to working at a very young age. So I did that. The other challenge I think for college was, even though I got some aid and even though I got some scholarships, obviously it was not enough. So I commuted and I worked full time while I was going to college. There were times when I had two full-time jobs, and some might ask, how is that possible? But that's when I was introduced to the medical field. I worked as a unit clerk, for those of you who have been in medicine long enough and remember that. So I would work two 16-hour shifts and an 8-hour shift, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then I worked a regular full-time job during the week, working 10-hour days. And then I went to college. And sometimes I made class, sometimes I didn't. And I studied a lot and slept very little. So it was challenging. But again, at the time, it just was. That's just what I had to do. And if I compare it to some of the childhood challenges, to me, it was a new and exciting period, because I could leave what was, and nobody in this new world of college knew the old person. They just knew me now. So I wasn't labeled as poor. I wasn't labeled as that family that, never had food or didn't have clothes. I was just me, and it was a whole different environment. So even though it was challenging, there were so many great things about it that were exhilarating, that allowed me to not even think about, what was.
Yeah, that's so amazing. How did the money scarcity continue to hold you back? And what was it like when you actually finally became an attending and now you've got this, huge paycheck? I'm sure your first paycheck was probably more money than you have ever seen in your life.
Yeah. It's so funny. I still remember that period, that transition between residency and attending, because I was trying to sell my residency house, which now you and I know that's a big mistake, right? I would not have sold it. I would have kept it and rented it, but I didn't know that at the time. But I was at that threshold of trying to move for my new job, and at the end of residency. So I didn't have enough money to make my last mortgage payment, and my house hadn't sold. And I remember the huge stress of that, of being behind. And then I had to take time off. I took 6 weeks off because I did not pass my boards the first time. And so I had to take time off to study to make sure I passed my boards the second time. And so that was even worse, because not only did I have very little residency income, now that residency income was gone, and I didn't even have the new income yet. So long story short, I had met my now husband at that time, and he's like, well, I can help you with it. And my pride and my ego and I always have figured it out, was really, really strong and in the way. But fortunately, the household, it was all done deal. I had a little money that I could live off of and transition. But that first check, I couldn't even look at it. It was like, it went in the bank account. I saw the money there. And then it was more like, okay, what do I need to use this money for? And my husband was the opposite. He was again, here's my fiance at that point. My husband was like, spend everything and let's have fun and you deserve it and let's go here and let's go there. So it was an interesting, just complete polar opposites. But my husband is always very generous. He grew up middle class, very generous. So after I took my boards and was taking time off, my husband actually paid for me to go to Argentina for several weeks so that I could travel and take time off between. So that was amazing. But yeah, it was really working through it with my husband because we were on two different pages about finances. And so mine was scarcity, save this, start paying down debt. And his was, let's enjoy life, let's have fun, before we, get, up to our eyeballs and work and kids and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, so let's talk more about getting married to, a man who's very different money mindset than you and how managing finances worked. I mean, you've been married now for many years.
Yeah, actually, so next month will be 14 years. I can't even, if we did not have 11-year-old daughters, we would not even believe we've been married that long because it's been like so fast. I can't even believe it. But, the funny thing is for us, we never had fights over money, ever. And mostly because of the type of person my husband is. Very generous, very giving, very loving. And he was very in tune with my needs and where I was. Now, I do wish he had pushed a little bit more. He did to the point where we took trips and stuff at the beginning of our marriage, mostly because I worked a lot and he managed our money and he would just say, it's fine. So there are a lot of things I would do differently. Number one, I'm so thankful he managed our money according to our wishes. But number two, I now know, and I'm in the position to realize you never hand off your money to somebody else. I don't care if it's your husband. I'm thankful he was able to take care of it. But what if he didn't? What if he didn't because he had a very different mindset? So there was a lot of communication that had to go into that. He respected my wishes. Our retirement accounts were invested very conservatively, low risk. And what was the downside of that? The downside is we had years and years and years in the best stock market in history with very little gains. And so then we get to this period where there's a lot more uncertainty. And now we're being more aggressive during this time, which is interesting, but it's because I'm less scared. But I think for being married to someone with a very different mindset, it really, really is sitting down and communicating and talking about each other's needs and being able to meet each other in the middle. So we met in the middle. We did take trips. We did spend money. We did buy the nice new house, way bigger than we needed because we're going to grow into it, right? Air quotes, grow into it. And now we've moved 8 times since then. But I think communication is the key and understanding that you have to meet in the middle when you have two very different mindsets.
Yeah, and you have some rental properties. So how did that come about?
With a lot of resistance. So one of the things that I'm very open about is talking about the burnout that I went through professionally. I would always joke that I'm triple certified in burnout because those stories, man, they were so hard for me. I went through severe burnout really 3 times. And so the third time I told my husband, there's no way I can keep doing this for another 10 years or 20 years. And he'd always say, you don't have to. From the very beginning, he told me, you don't have to. Background, my husband dropped out of his engineering degree his very last semester. He had 12 hours left. He was in the middle of that semester and he dropped out because he was like, I don't want to do engineering anymore. And I'm like, how can you do that? That's like so much money. So I met him at the end of pharmacy school. He went to pharmacy school ultimately. But yeah, the rental properties happened because I was burnt out. And we said, we're going to sell all our belongings and we're really going to start saving. And then we got all this money when we sold our big house and we're like, what do we do with this? And then my husband really started My husband became a stay-at-home dad when I left my first job and went to the second one. And so again, he's looking at what we're going to do if Liz can't work anymore or doesn't want to work anymore. So he's the one who did all the research. We made a lot of stumbling mistakes. We didn't have a network. We didn't know who to ask. We didn't know all the physician communities. But with the equity in that house, we bought 4 rental properties. Then we went on to buy 2 more. Then we downsized from a 3,600 square foot house to a 1,600 square foot house with 3 kids and a dog. And then we decided, yeah, this is too small. So we moved to a 2,200 square foot house, turned the old house into a rental property. We're in the 2,200 square foot house when COVID hit. My husband starts homeschooling. We decide this is it. We're too far from family. We were driving to Austin one day. I saw the Tesla being built. And I was like, traffic is already terrible. If we don't move now, we're never going to move. That day we went and signed on a new house. And I decided, I don't know if my job is going to let me. I don't know if I can work remote. But long story short, we moved again, turned that house into a rental. And so we've done that several times now. And we made mistakes. We learned from a lot of the physician groups. We've refinanced, took our money out, reinvested in syndications, done all of those things. Now, do I say I'm a real estate investor and am I very active in all the groups? No, and you don't have to be. Mine, our manager, we have a property manager for our properties. We invest through Black Swan for our syndications. And so you can do it, but to do it, you have to get past your fear. I was fearful all the way, but my fear of staying in clinical medicine and not knowing how I would be able to do it outweighed the fear of investing in real estate.
You've had so much growth through your own life, even before we ever coached together. So what made you decide to actually even come and hire me as your coach?
So the interesting thing is, I always say, like, my number one coach is my husband. He is, easily a decade ahead of me in his mindset and growth. I almost want to say he was born that way because I just learned so much from him. So by the time I came to you as a coach, I had already had so much growth. I had gone to Tony Robbins. I had done some other programs. And I knew where I was stuck. I knew how much growth I had. I knew what I overcame. I knew where I saw my potential, but it didn't matter how much money I made, how much I had in our retirement accounts, how many rental properties we had, how much my net worth had grown. It didn't matter. It was never enough. And so at that point, I knew this is nothing short of a mindset issue. And my husband and I talked about it all the time. And I said, I know that. I just don't know how to get past it. And I know it doesn't make sense. I know it's not logical, but my mind is stuck there. And so by the time I came to you, I had already identified that the problem was in my mind. And I am a big person on mindset. Like you said, I had already done tremendous growth. I talked to other people about mindset, and I just knew this was my blind spot and I was going to need help to get past it. So that's why I came to you. I remember my first $10,000 investment in coaching that was a Sonny Smith's program. And my husband and I said that was worth its weight in gold because of the growth I had from that. And so I just knew I wanted to keep going with the coaching in my particular blind spot. So for you as a money coach, I knew it was because it didn't matter how much I made, it was never enough. And I needed to get past that.
Yeah. And so where do you feel like you are on that now?
It's so funny. I feel that now that I've made a shift in where I am professionally and what I want to do, I feel very happy in my W-2 job, understanding that there is no W-2 job that is secure. I feel very happy taking a step back from my speaking and spending more time with the family. And I say that all because where I am now is my husband has really grown leaps and bounds in trading and doing his own thing. And he was a stay-at-home dad for the last 10 years to allow me to pursue the things I wanted to do and that were important to me. And I've had all that growth that I wanted. And now I want to support him in his growth journey. And so where I am now is if I lost my job today, we would be okay. And I have full confidence. Like, it's that really deep intuitive feeling for how he's going to be able to support us. And so, and that's blind faith, because is he matching my salary right now? No. But do I know his potential? Yes. And do I know that how we've set ourselves up financially with all of our investments and our savings, do I know that we'll be okay? Yes. And so where we are now in our growth is me learning to be okay with spending and knowing that it's okay. And so I told you before we started recording that I'm reading the Die with Zero book. And that has been really powerful to me, because it is kind of like continued coaching. You have to have continued coaching. And so I keep focusing my efforts on more philanthropy, more support to my family, and more learning to be okay with spending, and just knowing that we're going to be okay. And the difference now is I feel it in my heart, and I've never had that peace and comfort before. And so it's a whole new shift for me, but also recognizing that I do fall back. And then I do have to work on that mindset again. And I do remind myself, and I do go back to our coaching notes, and I do listen to podcasts, and I do hear other people's story, and I do read books for continued growth. It's like anything else. If you stop focusing your efforts there, then you can fall backwards. And so recognizing that, I just make sure that I'm doing the work I need to do to feel comfortable and grow that mindset around money.
Yeah, no, I love everything you said, because it's really easy for us to get to this new shift and then still slip back and recognize, like, that's normal, that's okay. And, it's about continuing improvement, and beliefs are just, thoughts we keep thinking again and again. And sometimes we'll revert to old beliefs, even when we've developed new beliefs.
One thing you helped me recognize during our coaching, and I jotted this down as a note to mention, is to explore the real problem. That is something that I was like, well, the real problem is this. And you challenged that belief. You challenged me and asking me, is that story really true? Is that really true? Or is that a story that you're telling yourself? And I think that that was really powerful, because I now know, and I've learned that a lot of times the real problem, the real reason we have fear, is because we're tying it to past stories and past situations and past traumas and things that we've encountered in the past. And those things are causing the fear. If I think back to it, I know that my fear around money is fear of loss, because when I was really young, my dad made a lot of money. And then he lost it, and we grew up in poverty. And so in my mind, there was no amount of money that was safe, because I could lose it all today and be in poverty again. But in reality, even if I lost it all today, I am a physician at the end of the day. I know how to make money. I know how to invest. I know that there's going to be challenges and that there will be losses, and that's okay. You can recover from it. And I think that's more important now more than ever, because a lot of people who have invested in real estate are a little bit nervous right now, right? But, this is just part of the cycle, and, things can slip backwards, and that's okay. It's okay to lose a little, and it's okay to, and just understanding that you're going to recover, and this will pass too.
Yeah, and I think that is such an important point, that there's really no number that anyone feels safe, right? There are people with multiple millions of dollars and it's still not enough, $10 million, 20. And then they think, well, when I hit this next number, I'll be fine. And then they hit that next number and they're still not fine, because it is all mindset.
I hit that number 3 times and moved the goalpost 3 times. So that definitely was very true for me. The Die with Zero book, one little piece in it I found very powerful. I used to worry a lot about running out of money before, we died, right? And now I'm reading a book about learning how to die with zero. So I did have resistance reading this book. But the reason I picked it up is like, I know that this is still a problem for me. Not as much as it used to be, but again, to that continued growth. He wrote in the book, he said, we're preparing for what happens, right? What if we have a catastrophic illness? And us being in medicine and me being a hospitalist for years, I had that very real fear. And so, a major hospitalization could really set you back, $250,000. So his point was, you're living conservatively your entire life. And for what? To save an extra $250,000, $500,000, just in case you have that catastrophic illness. And if you have that catastrophic illness, you can wipe out that entire lifetime of savings of $250,000 in a week of hospital stay. Whoa, that was really profound for me.
Mm-hmm.
I am depriving for a lifetime just in case this happens, and it'll be wiped out in a week. Wow, that was really powerful.
Right. We talked a little bit before we started recording about, not wanting to kind of pass on these beliefs to your children.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we get a little bit more about that? Because I don't have children, so it's something hard for me to talk about on, how to raise your kids talking about money. So I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, so this has been a challenging one because before I got coaching and before I really started getting comfortable with money, I was really projecting the scarcity on my kids to the point I would say, if it were for the fact that we have this house right now that we're in, which is it's still in a middle-class neighborhood, but it's a nice house, they would probably think that we were poor because of how I was acting around money. Everything was, do you know how much that costs? And do not waste that. And those strawberries cost $8 for organic strawberries. Do not waste that. Like every little thing was about money. And so once I started recognizing and hearing myself in them, I really started to worry. And so my husband would correct me in front of them, which I was very thankful for. And I told him, I do want you to say those things because I don't want my fears being projected on them. And really what I had to do was talk to them about more about my childhood and more about understanding that my childhood did scar me. And that is not our reality. This is my fear from my childhood. And talk to them more about abundance. Look, if we really didn't have money, would you be in private school? No, you would be in public school. Look, if we really didn't have money, would we be taking you on a trip for your birthday? No, you would get a birthday present. If we really didn't have money, would we be able to eat out like this or tip like this or, help others the way we do or donate to your school the way we do? No. So talking to them about every time I talk about money, again, I don't want you to have a fear about money. We have plenty of money, but I don't want you to waste money. Not only do I not want you to waste money, I want you to learn how to make your own money so that you're always secure. Not only do I want you to learn how to make money, I want you to learn how to be generous and share with less fortunate. I want you to learn how to help other people. And they understood that about my speaking. That's, I think, one of the things that they were most proud of is knowing that I was helping other people through my speaking. And so all of these things are just ongoing conversations and acknowledging my stories that I tell myself versus what the reality is.
Right. That's so great. So what age were your kids when you realized you really had to start talking about that abundance?
Honestly, as soon as I figured it out for myself, as soon as I started hearing myself in them, that's when I realized I needed to start talking about it. And again, one of the helpful things is my husband would catch me and my husband would correct the reality. and offer a different story. Like, what if that's not real? What if it's okay that we waste a little bit. Like, I don't want you overeating because you don't want to waste. If you're really not hungry, put it away in the refrigerator. And literally, I couldn't even do that. Like, I was like, nope, finish your meal. And so he would offer different stories about, other situations where it didn't have a positive ending because, the stories that we can sometimes tell ourselves. So the answer is, as soon as you recognize that what they are saying is not aligned with what you would like, it's aligned with maybe your current beliefs, but is that those really beliefs, or they're, just limiting beliefs and stories you're telling yourself? And as soon as I recognized that, I knew these had to be conversations. The other thing is, I think in the younger generations, there is some loss in the work hard approach. And I honestly think rightfully so, a little bit. We think that the answer is working harder. And, that's how I grew up, is thinking, I don't care what it takes, I'll work harder and I'll be able to figure it out. And I also don't want to pass that on to my kids. There is a way to make an abundance of money without working harder. I want to offer that to my kids, but also offer work ethic, accountability, taking pride in what you do, all very important. And I think that's the balance with the younger generation, is for me that, yes, it's okay to not work so hard, but when you are in a position and you do have a job, doing the no-show or just doing enough to get by because that's what everybody else does, I don't believe in that. Take pride in what you do. Understand that someone is paying you money. And so those are just, things that I want to teach. I agree, you don't have to work as hard as I did. You're in a very different circumstance, but I want you to have good work ethic. I want to hold yourself accountable. And so I give myself jobs, my kids jobs, not myself. I give my kids jobs. I don't give money to them. They have to earn it. And so one day I was leaving the house and I was on the phone and I said, girls, be sure you move the laundry over to the dryer, put the new load in. And they're like, okay, mommy. And I'm leaving. And my friend was like, your kids do laundry? And I was like, yeah, they're 11 already. And she's like, I never did laundry, not even in college. I would take it back to my mom to do. I didn't learn until I was an adult. To me, that was, mind blowing. But I think about, my husband was kind of the same way. And so my sister-in-law watched the kids while we had to go out of town one time. And she's like, okay, what do y'all want for lunch? I'm going to make your lunch. And my kids are like, oh, no, we make our own lunch. And they went, and she said, it was amazing to see. They were like little elves in the kitchen making their lunch. And they knew to get one fruit and one vegetable and one snack and one main course. And it was unbelievable. And so teaching work ethic, I think, is very important, because you cannot be lazy. Entrepreneurship, you can't be lazy. There is hard work that's involved. And maybe there's a place that you can reach and you can delegate and do less. But up to that point, you need good work ethic. You need to know you don't give up. You need to know you have to problem solve and shift. And that's all important. So those are the things that I'm trying to pass on to my kids. Do I get it perfect? No. Do I go back to my old beliefs? Yes. Do I catch myself? Yes. Do I give my kids permission to challenge me when they think that I'm not making sense? Yes, absolutely. We teach active communication. Mommy is not always right, and that's important to know. And so when I'm saying something that goes against what I've previously said or what you think I've taught you, I want you to challenge me. I want you to ask me. So
I love everything you just said. That is all incredible. Especially like working hard is not necessarily like you just have to keep working harder, but having a good work ethic. I love how you spelled that out. And yeah, because there was definitely a time in college where I kind of realized like, yeah, no matter how hard you work, it may not just happen, but it's not about just sitting and grinding yourself. It's about finding help, reaching out to other people potentially, like using resources in order to actually get your goal.
No. And especially, I think this is important for those that are still in a W-2 job. I'm still in a W-2 job. It doesn't matter how hard you work, they will give you more.
Yeah.
It's important to set healthy boundaries and then take pride and ownership in what you do. But doing more is not always the answer. It's absolutely not.
Yeah. And sometimes it's also about talking about what you're actually doing and what you're contributing, because you can do a lot more and people don't even realize it, right?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I love that. I love that. You know, sometimes we have a hard time like self-praise and, talking about ourselves. I still do. I don't like to introduce myself. I don't like to talk about what I've done. I generally don't like to do that, but it is very important because there are so many times we are doing way more than people recognize. And the amount of work, especially as physicians, that we do is taken for granted a lot of times. One more committee that you're on, or one more a quality project, or one more whatever it is, there is so much that we're doing that people forget. They don't realize because you just kind of always do that. And so acknowledging all the value that you bring is so important.
Yeah. And a lot of times we think, oh, well, our work will speak for itself. And it's like, no, everyone's really thinking about themselves and people are not necessarily thinking about everything you're doing.
For sure. And a lot of times we forget, we think that, if somebody is mean or someone says something ugly, that it's directed at you, and it oftentimes has nothing to do with you. And it has to do with their position and where they are and the stresses of their job. So when it comes to job and the jobs and the work we're doing, they are just thinking about all the work they are doing and not at all focusing on you. So highlighting the value you bring. When people have annual performance reviews, I think it's so important to talk about your big accomplishments. We do that in our organization now. I hated it at the beginning, but now I see the tremendous value. These are all the big accomplishments I've done. These are the things that are still in progress. This is the value I bring to you as the employer, all important.
Yeah. And I also really love the point that you made previously about basically you're saying like your mind and your ability to perform is like your greatest asset, that you will always build, like you as a physician, you as an entrepreneur, you as an investor, like you can always rebuild.
Yeah. And, I talk to my kids a lot about that. I talk to them about shifting. And, my husband and I are both great examples for this. I tell them, we could have stayed stuck. I could have stayed stuck in poverty, but no, I chose to work toward a different thing. And I got there and I said, okay, this is great. I want more. Worked on towards something else. And this is great. I want more. I want to work towards something else. It is okay to shift. And like I said at the beginning, my husband shift. He went to an engineering program, decided this is not for me after his internship, shifted. A lot of people would be, why not just get the degree? You've already paid for it. It's your last semester. That way you can have it under your belt. And his answer was, I knew I would never use it, because he was staying true to himself and knowing that I am not going to spend my life doing something I don't want to do, giving himself permission to shift. Then he shifted to pharmacy. He did pharmacy, I forget, for 8 years, and then became a stay-at-home dad. And boy, I tell you, there were so many comments when he did that. Must be nice to be married to a doctor. And I would be like, they have no idea.
Yeah.
They have no idea how hard it is for you to raise twins and run the household because I'm working 36-hour shifts every third day. They have no idea. And then, so he shifted to being a stay-at-home dad. And then once they got old enough, he's like, okay, I'm going to shift and do something else. And he shifted into the trading and investing along the way, picking up little things. I want to do real estate, So I think it's so important to understand our whole life is a big journey. There is no quitting. There is no giving up. It's shifting. Let's give it a new term. Shift to do something that is more aligned with what your values to be. And sometimes we don't know. We think we want to do one thing. I thought I wanted to travel and speak, and I did that. I had a good run at it. but it's okay to shift and say, that's not what I want anymore. And there are no lost lessons. They're only lost if you don't take it as a lesson. If you call it a failure, it's a failure. If you call it a lesson, it's a lesson.
I think that's a great ending point. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast. If people want to reach out to you, how can they find you?
Well, I'm on social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, Liz Aguirre, MD. For the most part, I will say I am focusing, as I said, my efforts on my health and on my family. So I'm still active there, not as active, but I am always happy to help and, answer questions. And that is one of the things that I enjoy most, is helping other people in different capacities. And a lot of times that just comes from asking questions and helping, people who've had the challenges I've had. So, yep, those two are the best way to reach out.
Thanks so much. And just one last shameless question. What will you tell people about coaching with me?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I will just say that coaching in general is worth every penny in my mind. Coaching specific to your needs is even more valuable. And so you provided me with the exact coaching that I needed for my problem. So if you are struggling with your mindset around money, I highly recommend coaching with Elisa. To me, it just started the ball rolling, and I haven't stopped since then. And so highly recommend it. Thank you for coaching me when I needed it the most. And thank you for helping me get over the hump. I wouldn't be here talking on your podcast about all the progress I've made around money if it weren't for you, because I wouldn't even buy myself a new bedroom set when I first started coaching, and my bedroom set was 15 years old. So thank you for doing that. And yeah, highly recommend it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for those kind words. And thanks for listening to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you could share it with your friends and colleagues. And now for the disclaimer. I am not a certified financial planner, accountant, or attorney, and nothing I say should be construed as professional investment, tax, or legal advice. This show is primarily for your education and entertainment. I am a physician, but I'm probably not your physician. So if you need any medical advice, please contact your own physician. Thank you.